Welcome, everyone. This is Victoria McLean, your host, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning. At this time, I'd like to remind everyone to keep your phone on mute. We have reserved 10 minutes at the end of the session for questions and answers. Should you have any questions during this presentation, please send them through the Questions tab on the right side of your screen. Our speaker will address them at the end of our presentation. This webinar is a part of our SAP webinar series that we will be conducting. Listed are the upcoming webinars. Please stay tuned for future invitations. We certainly look forward to your continued participation. Let me share a little bit about ProSoft with you. ProSoft is a premium consulting company providing a wide variety of services in the SAP and enterprise integrations platform. The presenter for this session this morning is Hanu Ravu, our Vice President of SAP Business Enterprise Solutions. And now let me introduce Hanu Ravu. Hanu?
Yep, thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hanu Ravu. I will be your coach for this session. For the next 30 minutes, I'll be taking you through the topic application support. Application support is many times is a topic that doesn't get necessary attention, but it's very essential for most companies to actually derive the value out of the investment that companies make. I'm sure most of you realize that millions of dollars have been spent on implementation, but for us to actually derive the value written on that investment, application support is most critical area to actually make sure that the return is realized. So having said that, I would like to actually take you through the way I've structured this presentation is primarily 3 parts. The first part is to make sure that we understand the technology that is involved in the application support area. Understand that there is a consistent terminology that is followed, at least for this presentation purpose. And the second part is to talk about some of the factors that will actually influence the quality of application support, how to make application support a little bit more effective. Those are the factors that we'll talk about a little bit more detail. And the third section is the area where I want to talk about some case studies, some of the scenarios that we have experienced with some of the clients, where what has been the condition there and what type of model is at play and how things are moving forward. So those are the broadly 3 areas that I want to cover for this session today. So having said that, the first session, which is the terminology part of it, application support. What does application support really comprise of? It essentially includes the care and feeding that the system takes. That is, once the implementation is complete, SAP implementation, it could involve ECC, BW, object, any of the SAP application, any of the SAP products. But what does it take to really maintain the implemented solution to continue to deliver the value that it's designed for? So that's the area that application support essentially caters to. And it involves the technical requirements. The system itself will require maybe configuration updates, maybe patches to be applied, and things of that nature, which are essentially technical aspects to make sure that the system continues to function the way it is supposed to function. That is the care and feeding part. That's one segment. And the second area where application support plays a very important role is the hand-holding for the business teams and user community or IT teams. There is obviously application support is spread over a long period of time compared to an implementation type environment. Implementation typically has a defined start date and defined end date. And typically it may be a 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, depending on the size of implementation. But application support is something that is expected to continue well beyond the implementation, and it typically takes much longer duration, longer time period into consideration. So during this period, there are going to be turnover, the resources change in the resources from IT point of view, or from user changes, process owners changes. There are multiple things that will take place during this period, but the application support is expected to be consistent, relatively consistent across this long period of time. So that's an area that that application support needs to address. And the third point is the general improvements. What we mean by improvements is as a part of the implementation, a process is designed, a process is put in place, how it is supposed to function, but over a period of time, the process requires maintenance. Typical improvements, it could be the users would be using the system, business process will come up with, process owners will come up with better ways to actually improve the process, better ways to handle the process over a period of time. Those improvements are something that could be implemented, updated as a part of the process. So that's one area that we cover as a part of the application support. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. All right, but the improvements, what we're talking about, typically that doesn't include the solution redesign type activities. There are instances where over a period of time, business changes so significantly that you may end up having to redesign the solution. That is something that is not typically included in the application support. Similarly, the rollouts, upgrades, and new processes, those are the typical things that are not really a part of the application support. Are you able to hear me? All right. Okay, I take that feedback was all right. Okay. So what is included in the application support? We have talked about it, and in terms of what is the terminology that is used. Sometimes application support is also called as AMS. This is the standard SAP terminology. Maintenance. It all means the same. At the same time, application support does not cover the maintenance fee. That is, sometimes this is confused between the some of the, especially the newer SAP customers. Sometimes AMS is confused with the maintenance fee that SAP charges. It's typically 22% that SAP charges. This is not the same as the software maintenance fee that SAP charges. So that's on the terminology part of it. And moving to the service level definitions. Service level is also an area that when we talk about support, we talk about level 1, level 2, level 3 supports. Level 1 is the definition. Essentially, it stands for the how-to type questions, meaning that these are typically the user questions. The system is designed for what the processes that it's been designed for, but the users experience an unexpected question or anything of that nature and ask these type of questions. This does not really mean that the system is not doing what it's supposed to do, but the users will have questions on how to use the system. So these are generally not, these questions do not really translate into configuration changes or development type activities into in the system, but these are primarily to clarify how a user can perform his duty. That's what is a level 1 type questions. And level 2 is typically involves some level of improvements to the implemented processes. Again, I would like you to pay attention to the word that I'm using as implemented processes. Again, this is the context that is very important. There may be questions that are related to processes that are not implemented. That's a different scenario. Typically, the new processes are outside of application support realm. So improvements from the point of view of this may be a business change that occurs, or the user community, business community comes up with handling things in a better manner, which calls for changes to the system. Those are the type of improvements that we're talking about here. And like I mentioned earlier, the resolution of such tickets, that is level 2 type tickets, typically involves configuration changes to the system, or it could involve development type activities, what we call it as RISE FWs, which are RSFW stands for reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, forms, and workflows. Those are the type of development objects it might translate to. Resolution times are typically dependent on the type of solution that is chosen. And obviously, I'll be talking a little bit ahead in terms of how the SLAs are structured, how the level 2s and level 3s and those type of things will translate into SLAs. So resolution times again are dictated by the solution picked, and also many times the testing process and also the approval process. Each different clients use different types of approval process. There may be a schedule that need to be followed in terms of migrating the changes from development to quality and so on. So that will dictate the timelines. And moving to level 3 are typically significant changes. These are the implementation of new processes, new modules, and things of that nature. Excuse me. So level 3 type services, essentially level 3 type services are include considerable changes to the processes. It could be new processes, new modules, and surely involves configuration development activities. And the significant difference here is level 3 tickets will follow an implementation-like approach, meaning that there is a definition phase in terms of what is the requirement, and a realization phase to come up with a solution design and implement the solution, go through the testing process, approval process, and then finally take it to production. So level 3s typically will take an implementation type approach, and hence it will take a little longer, little different time horizon to resolution. So those are the service level definitions on level 1, level 2, level 3. I move on to the next slide, which defines the severity levels. I think, let me go back to the previous slide one more time. When we talk about service levels, we are looking at the tickets primarily from the point of view of technology and what it takes to really address, from a technical point of view, how to address the ticket. That is what is the view that is taken when we are looking at, when we are classifying service levels as level 1, level 2, level 3. But when we go to the next slide, when we talk about severity levels are essentially looking at those tickets from the point of view of the business. How does this particular ticket impact the business? That is, severity 1 means that essentially business is not in a position to run their processes in the system, and there is no workaround around. And that's not the situation that we want to be in, but that is what is classified as severity 1. This is typically meaning that the system is completely down, and nobody is able to really log into the system and be able to perform any of the business transactions. That is what is severity 1. That means that this is the highest priority, and most attention need to be given to address these tickets. And severity 2 means that it is there is a set of users who are not in a position to use the functionality, but there is a temporary workaround in place. The system is up and running. The system is not behaving the way it usually behaves, but there is a workaround in place. So that means that's the severity level, severity 2 definition. Severity 3 is the situation where users have been running the scenario, business processes in a certain manner, but it's a general problem that is not causing any major impact to the business, but that it may translate into some type of improvement to the system itself. That's the classification with respect to the severity levels. Moving on to the next slide, this is the SLAs, service level agreements. This is what we typically most application support environments we end up talking about, which is essentially a combination of severity levels and service level combinations. For each of those combinations, we define what is an accepted SLA. When a ticket is raised in the system, what is the pattern that one should follow. So typically it is measured from the point of view of the first response and resolution times. The first response being the time that is taken to actually get back to the user saying that we have received the ticket, we have understood that this ticket is important, and an appropriately knowledgeable resource is assigned to the ticket. That is what is the first response. That is the communication that goes out to the user stating that an appropriate technical resource or a functional resource is been identified and assigned to that particular ticket. That is what is the first response. And resolution time, obviously, as the name sounds, it is the time when the actual issue is fixed. So these are the broadly two levels of service level agreements. Customers also use a third level type what you call SLA, which is called a time to notify. This is just simply meaning that okay, the technical resource has looked at it, or a functional resource, or whoever is the appropriate resource to work on a ticket has looked at the ticket and has come up with an approximate timeline on how much time it takes to actually address the ticket, or an approach to address the ticket. That is what is captured in time to notify. So I've not included everything. I did not clutter the whole section here, but essentially it will have a first response and resolution times. Those are two must, and there could be a third level that is called as a time to notify. And again, like we talked about it, there's level 1, level 2, level 3 of service levels. I think it's fairly clearer from a level 1, level 2 point of view. But level 3, what we have talked about in the previous slides also, these level 3 tickets typically follow an implementation-like approach, and SLAs are dictated by, SLAs are primarily controlled by what type of the requirement is that, and how long does it take to actually go through the realization phase. Those factors will dictate the SLAs for that. But the rest of the ones, level 1, level 2, typically, surely level 1, severity 1, that is something that needs to be addressed right away. I mean, it's as you see on the screen here, first response within 2 hours and resolution times immediately after that. And that's the definitions with respect to the terminology. So moving to the second section, what I've talked about is the factors that will actually influence the application support in general, in terms of the effectiveness, in terms of how to make an application support more effective. As a first step here, we need to understand the value chain that is involved. Obviously, the IT services typically, most companies are there to actually serve the end customer, end user community. So end user community is the one that is running the transactions in the system. Those are in the topmost layer right here. What you see on the topmost bar here, and that's the community that we're all working towards to fulfill their objectives. And the bottommost here is the technical infrastructure, which is obviously the systems itself and the basis teams, network teams, and those type of teams that are included in this bar here. In between, at the second layer is where we have the functional, technical, and basis. I'm primarily talking with respect to an ERP or a standard SAP environment where there is functional, technical, basis type resources who are needed to support the application support, provide the application support, and the in-between layers here that you see here, solution owners and process owners, those are the most critical ones. Many times we end up having to not define those roles. We look at it, I mean, most companies look at it from the point of view of identifying technical resources, functional resources, and assign them as a part of the support team to deliver the support. But many times the companies don't identify the process owners and solution owners. Okay, just to look at it and understand this a little bit closely, the solution owners are the ones who have the big picture on how the solution is designed and what kind of modifications, what kind of variations that could be done without deteriorating the quality of the service. That's how we can maintain the system. So they have the clear understanding on the business process, how business process is supposed to work. At the same time, they have a clear understanding from a technology point of view, what type of changes are allowed to the system, what type of changes are not really allowed. And that meaning that they have the good background on the solution itself, what the solution is architected for, and what type of changes are allowed. And similarly, the process owner community is the most critical for the application support. And those are the folks who have a good understanding on the process itself, and they know they have been a part of the implementation, or otherwise they have the good knowledge on the the process itself and why a system has been designed in a certain manner, and how to make sure that we leverage the system, and what type of changes should be allowed and what type of changes should not be allowed. What constitutes a new project, or what constitutes a support ticket type scenario. So this value chain many times is known, sort of not known, and that's how most organizations end up sometimes in less than ideal type of response situation. So most cases, process owners and solution owners are not really identified. That is one thing that I've noticed in most organizations. But that is one area that need to be very clearly paid attention to, and to ensure the quality of support. So again, that's one part as a value chain itself, and more importantly, this value chain is something that need to be evaluated, looked at from the point of view of each process. Order to cash is a process, procure to pay is another process. These are the processes that we have, but by each process, we need to identify this value chain. Who are the folks that are involved? Who is the process owner for order to cash process? Similarly, for procure to pay, who is the solution owner? So in each process, identify these roles to make sure that sufficient attention, sufficient focus is been given to provide the quality of support, and that's very crucial. Most of the times, it is something that is overlooked, and most importantly, most of the times, I think it gets mixed up with most of the on-site activities or new projects that are going on. Obviously, skilled resources are at demand, so solution owners get assigned to multiple areas. They get digressed. They get better visibility on working on an implementation type activity. So it ends up, application support ends up having not getting sufficient attention. I think that's the primary one. That's one of the reason why application support effectiveness somewhat suffers sometimes. So moving to the next slide. Once we understand the process, understand the value chain, the next area that contributes to the application support is the process maturity. When we talk about process maturity, we're talking about how the process goes through from the stabilization to maturity levels after the go live support. Let's assume that the time zero, what I'm showing here is the bottom left-hand corner, is the time zero, which represents the end of go live support. From that point onwards, how the process actually matures. Implementation, completing go live support is one part, one stage, but stabilizing the solution, both from a technical point of view, from IT point of view, and from business point of view, is a different game. It does take time. It does take users will take time to understand how the process is designed, how it is supposed to work, what it is meant to, how it is meant to work, and how it is supposed to be leveraged upon. That is what is the stabilization phase, and typically it takes at least 3 months, 2 to 3 months type period from a standard process. Again, these are the high-level numbers that I'm talking about. And once the stabilization is complete, then you move to something called the optimization and continuous improvement phase. During this period, essentially, you end up leveraging the solution, or making sure, you basically leveraging the solution to get the best value out of it. This is the time where the teams are cost optimized. You could move some of the support in a remote model with limited on-site requirement, and SLA-based support model surely works in this model. And the third level is the maturity. This is where relatively things are really calm. Everybody knows, IT team knows, business knows how to run the process in the respective areas. It will have very limited system changes. People who are using, the users who are using, they get their value. They exactly know how to work around the system, how to work with the system in terms of getting their work done. So during this period, this is a primarily remote support model. This requires minimal on-site type requirement, on-site presence to provide this type of support. Surely SLA-based model will work. And the very first one that I talked about is the stabilization. Stabilization is the area where it is a lot of hand-holding that is required from the business community point of view, and also response times is the most critical here, and it requires that's the time that the team need to be pretty much on site. So that clarifies that basically talks about the maturity process. Moving to the next slide here, I have put together a few factors that influence the support quality. I think we've talked about the value chain. What are the areas? What are the considerations that will actually value chain contribute to? And we need to really look at it. At the assignment of process owners, solution owners by process is the most crucial thing. Most of the times, what is done in most organizations is the assignments are done by technology. For example, sales and distribution, we assign a resource for that particular module. Materials management could be another area. We assign respective resources for each of these modules, but not necessarily assign them by process. That kind of putting them together, bucketing them by technology, sometimes takes the focus away from the business process perspective. So that kind of creates sometimes some type of inconsistent focus from the support team standpoint that contributes to some kind of gaps. And that's one of the primary reasons why support quality suffers. And similarly, we're talking about process maturity, evaluate maturity. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have done the implementation, whatever, 2 months down the line, 3 months down the line. It does not necessarily mean that all the processes are stable after 3 months has passed. Each process will take its own maturity cycle, depending on who are the process owners that is involved, what is their knowledge level, what has been their past background with respect to SAP, and those are the type of factors that will impact process maturity. So it needs to be evaluated by process, and a clearly laid out plan that need to be put in place to ensure support quality is adequate. And moving to the third point, which is the business dynamics. Obviously, most businesses continue to change. There could be mergers and acquisitions. There could be entering into new markets and things of that nature. Maybe a new product is being launched, and any of these aspects will translate into changes to the system, and those will also contribute to support quality. Many times these are overlooked. Many times these are taken for granted, but support requires a special focus in those areas as well. And the next one is the internal SAP capability. That is the quality of skills that are maintained within the organization. This has an impact in terms of how to communicate with respect to the remote teams, communicate with respect to the user community. These skills will have a considerable impact on how support quality is realized. And the last one, which is the solution documentation, I think most organizations know about the solution documentation. They would talk about it. Every organization thinks they have the documentation, but most of the times this documentation is something that's been created during the implementation time and is not updated during the course of the support process. As the system changes, as it is updated, has been improved, the documentation is typically not updated. That's one primary reason that will cause inconsistencies for the new teams. I mean, it doesn't provide sufficient information for the new teams who are coming on board. And more importantly, there is no system. More importantly, the documentation is at the development object level many times. It is a functional spec, technical spec type documentation, but documentation is not really maintained at the process level. Why a certain process has been designed in a certain manner, and what are the reasons, and what are the limitations, and what are the considerations that have been taken into account while building that solution. Those are the factors that will that are not many times taken into account, which will cause challenges to the quality of support going forward. I think I'm running a little bit late here. Want to move to the third part of the section here, which is the case studies here. I want to talk about the three of them here. This is a company that we've been supporting. ProSoft as an organization has been supporting over a period of time right now, 3 or 4 years now, 3 years I think at least. It's an electrical distribution company based out of Missouri, and the process maturity level, I think I've color-coded the processes like earlier. yellow, blue, and green, they are at a level blue. I think they're relatively stable. They're in the state of optimization. They're trying to add value in a continuous improvement model. Business change, relatively minimal. It's largely the business changes that we're talking about are general improvement type business changes, and they've been live since 2010. Internal SAP skill is very minimal. They have only above skill internally, and we support this particular client both functional, technical, and basis areas. And documentation, like I mentioned, is limited. It's dated. And the support model perspective, it's completely remote type model that's at play. We have offshore teams, on-site teams, offshore teams or onshore teams, which are engaged periodically as needed in an on-demand basis. Very occasional on-site visits, depending on what type of tickets that we're talking about in a level 3 type scenario, which requires some level of more hand-holding, more communication-driven type situations. We do engage on-site activities, but it's largely remote work that's being done. And the pricing model, more importantly, is the on-demand pricing model. The client basically is comfortable with this type of model. Depending on how much they consume, they pay for it as much. I have a slide that towards the end which will talk about the pricing models that we typically offer. The next client is a chemical company. It's a $3 billion chemical company based out of Ohio. We are supporting this client in multiple regions. I'm straight away jumping to the support model here. We are supporting them currently in different regions: North America, India, and also in Brazil. Is obviously relatively stable from the business process standpoint, from business process maturity point of view, and it's been a company that's been using SAP for a long time. So there is a considerable amount of knowledge internally. There is a qualified team. There is a documentation exists, but it is pretty dated. This is another client which we have been supporting in a fixed fee format. This is a client which believes in guaranteed consumption of certain level of support. So we are in a fixed fee by type of model. The point that I'm trying to make here is that we're flexible in terms of how the support can be delivered, how it is priced. That's one of the value that we bring to the table. And the third company here that we're talking about is a New York-based company, which is going through several rollouts currently. It's been on been on SAP from 2010. I can't call surely them as being stable yet. They're in the stabilization phase. There's a lot of activity that's going on from a rollout point of view, which has an impact on the existing implemented solution as well. So internal skills are very minimal, but we support this client from a primarily in a mixed model with 60% on-site and 40% offshore. And it's an FTE type model where the resources are kind of dedicated for the client, and they work directly with the respective support teams and the implementation teams. And those are the 3 case studies that I wanted to cover, and also wanted to briefly talk about the pricing models. Have 3 different models. Like I mentioned, we offer a very flexible models. Option 1, 2, 3, which are on-demand fixed fee or FTE type models. I think I've crossed my time a little bit here, but I'm here to take any questions.
Thank you for that great presentation, Hanu. At this time, we'd like to open it up to the Q&A.
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, I think there's a question on RISE-FW. I think I've provided a definition of what RISE-FW stands for. It stands for reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, forms, and workflow. So those are all the different types of development objects that are involved in SAP world.
If there are no further questions, we would like to thank everyone for their time this morning. Thank you, Hanu.
All right, thank you, Victoria. Thank you, gentlemen.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.